Everything happening around the Pittsburgh Steelers defense right now feels completely different from what fans have been used to watching over the last several years, and the biggest reason for that change is Patrick Graham. From the early portions of OTAs, there are already clear signs that this defense is heading toward a massive schematic transformation, and honestly, Steelers fans should probably be paying very close attention to what's developing behind the scenes, because this may end up becoming one of the most unpredictable and dangerous defensive units Pittsburgh has had in a very long time. For years, the Steelers built their identity around single high safety looks. That style became part of the DNA of the franchise through different eras of defensive football in Pittsburgh. But the NFL has changed dramatically, and now the modern game is dominated by two high safety structures, match coverages, disguised rotations, and defensive systems built to confuse quarterbacks before and after the snaps. Patrick Graham appears fully committed to bringing that modern approach directly into Pittsburgh, and the early signs from OTAs are already showing exactly how serious this transition is becoming. One of the biggest developments being seen right now is the heavy use of two high safety looks before the snap. That may sound simple on the surface, but for opposing quarterbacks, it changes everything. The Steelers are no longer looking like a defense that simply lines up, shows pressure, and attacks in predictable ways. Instead, Graham appears focused on disguise, flexibility, and forcing quarterbacks to hesitate. And in today's NFL, hesitation is deadly. The interesting part is that this isn't just a copy and paste version of another defensive system around the league. Patrick Graham seems to be blending multiple philosophies together. There are elements connected to the modern match coverage style defenses that have exploded across the NFL recently, especially the systems influenced by coaches like Mike Macdonald and the Vic Fangio tree. Those defenses thrive on versatility, communication, and confusing passing concepts with rotating coverages. But Graham also appears ready to add another layer to all of this by mixing in aggressive man coverage concepts inspired by the New England style defenses he worked around earlier in his career. That combination could become terrifying for opposing offenses, because here's where the Steelers suddenly become very dangerous. Pittsburgh now has the personnel to actually execute these ideas at a very high level. Joey Porter Jr. is already viewed as one of the most physical young corners in football, and now the Steelers have paired him with Jamal Dean on the opposite side. Dean is coming off an excellent season and remains one of the stronger veteran man-to-man corners in the league. That means Pittsburgh can line up in a harmless-looking two-high shell before the snap, only to rotate into aggressive single-high man coverage after the play begins. That's the kind of disguise that creates confusion, late throws, and turnovers. And if the coverage holds for even a second longer than expected, that's where the Steelers' pass rush becomes a nightmare. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig already create problems individually, but Patrick Graham appears to be designing situations where all three could attack together in specialized passing down packages. That's where the defense starts looking truly explosive. Patrick Queen even hinted at this defensive evolution recently when describing the new scheme as a mix between Baltimore and New England concepts. That statement alone says a lot. Baltimore's modern defensive structure under Mike Macdonald became known for confusion, disguise, and versatility. New England defenses traditionally focused on discipline, man coverage, and taking away an opponent's strengths. If Graham successfully combines both philosophies together with Pittsburgh's defensive talent, the ceiling for this group becomes incredibly high. But maybe the most fascinating piece in all of this is Jalen Ramsey. The Steelers appear ready to use Ramsey in a completely different way than many fans might initially expect. Instead of simply leaving him outside at cornerback full-time, Pittsburgh seems prepared to turn him into a versatile big nickel chess piece. And honestly, that role may fit him perfectly at this stage of his career. Ramsey still brings physicality, instincts, intelligence, and versatility, even if he's no longer the same pure outside speed corner he once was earlier in his career. Patrick Graham seems ready to maximize that versatility by moving him around the defense constantly. On early downs, Ramsey could become a major factor against the run while also handling slot responsibilities and coverage. On passing downs, things become even more interesting because Pittsburgh may use him in a rover-type role, essentially functioning like a hybrid linebacker and safety in the middle of the field. That creates enormous flexibility for the defense because Ramsey can cover tight ends, attack underneath routes, help disguise blitzes, and bait quarterbacks into mistakes. And when quarterbacks are already trying to identify disguised too-high shells before the snap, having Ramsey roaming underneath creates another layer of uncertainty. Then you start imagining the potential passing down packages. Picture TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig all attacking together in NASCAR fronts designed purely to pressure the quarterback. Imagine Cam Hayward and Derek Harmon helping collapse the pocket inside while Keanu Benton attacks gaps as an interior penetrator. Behind them, Ramsey is floating around the middle of the field while Joey Porter Jr. and Jamal Dean lock things down outside. Suddenly, this defense starts looking faster, more aggressive, more modern, and significantly more flexible than what Steelers fans have watched in recent seasons. And honestly, that's why there's growing belief that this unit could become one of the elite defenses in football if everything clicks together under Patrick Graham. But at the same time, there's still one unresolved situation hanging over this defense right now, and it involves Darnell Savage. The Steelers originally planned to bring Savage into the secondary much earlier in the offseason, yet the deal still hasn't officially been finalized. Reports indicate there has been some kind of medical issue delaying the signing, though apparently not enough to completely kill the deal. According to recent updates, both Savage and the Steelers still expect the signing to eventually happen, but the uncertainty surrounding the timeline is beginning to raise questions, and that matters because Pittsburgh's safety depth behind the starters is still far from perfect. Deshaun Elliott and Jaquan Brisker give the Steelers a solid starting foundation, and Ramsey can obviously help at safety in certain situations, but depth remains a concern. Young options like Sebastian Castro and Robert Spears Jennings remain unproven, while rookie Dalen Everett could eventually transition into a safety role as well. But if Savage's situation drags on too long, Pittsburgh may eventually have to seriously consider alternative veteran options still available on the market. That's where things start getting very interesting for the Steelers moving forward, because the overall structure of this defense feels close to being complete, but there are still unanswered questions that could impact just how dominant this unit truly becomes once the regular season arrives. And if Patrick Graham successfully puts all these pieces together the way Pittsburgh hopes, are Steelers fans about to witness the beginning of one of the most dangerous defenses this franchise has built in years? The situation surrounding Darnell Savage becomes even more important once you start looking deeper into what Patrick Graham is trying to build with this secondary, because this defense is no longer designed to simply survive on raw talent alone. Communication, disguise, positioning, and versatility are going to matter more than ever now. That means every defensive back on the field has to understand multiple responsibilities at once, especially in these modern match coverages that Pittsburgh appears ready to feature heavily this season. And honestly, that's probably why the Steelers have become so aggressive in targeting versatile defensive backs throughout this offseason. When you look at the structure Patrick Graham seems to prefer, it's very clear he wants players who can wear multiple hats depending on the situation. One snap might require a player to function like a deep safety. The next snap, that same player may rotate into the slot, attack downhill against the run, or suddenly become part of a disguised pressure package. That level of flexibility is what separates good defenses from elite defenses in today's NFL. And the Steelers suddenly have several players capable of handling exactly those kinds of responsibilities. Jaquan Brisker, for example, fits this style extremely well because of his physicality and ability to operate close to the line of scrimmage. Deshaun Elliott also brings toughness and versatility that works naturally inside these modern defensive concepts. But the real X factor remains Jalen Ramsey, because his role may become the glue that connects the entire defense together. The more you think about it, the more it feels like Pittsburgh may be preparing to unleash Ramsey in a role that allows him to impact every area of the field. Instead of forcing him into one specific position, Patrick Graham appears ready to turn him into a movable weapon that offenses constantly have to identify before the snap. And that alone creates problems because quarterbacks hate uncertainty. If Ramsey lines up deep, offenses have to prepare for disguised rotations. If he lines up near the box, offenses have to respect his ability against the run or in underneath coverage. If he moves into the slot, suddenly tight ends and slot receivers have a completely different matchup to deal with. And if Graham starts sending him on blitzes from unexpected angles, now the quarterback has even more to process before the play develops. That's the kind of defensive football Pittsburgh seems determined to play now. Less static, more aggressive, more confusing, more adaptable. And there's another important detail here that Steelers fans probably shouldn't ignore. Patrick Graham has built a reputation throughout the league as a coach capable of maximizing defensive talent. That matters because this roster already has star-level players at multiple levels of the defense. TJ Watt remains one of the most feared pass rushers in football. Cam Hayward still provides leadership and physical dominance inside. Patrick Queen brings athleticism and range at linebacker. Joey Porter Jr. continues developing into a legitimate shutdown presence outside. Then you add all the versatility being introduced into the secondary, and suddenly this starts looking like a defense with answers for almost every type of offensive attack. Against spread offenses, Pittsburgh can flood the field with defensive backs and speed. Against physical rushing teams, they still have size and toughness inside with players capable of controlling the line of scrimmage. Against elite quarterbacks, they can disguise coverages, rotate post-snap, and pressure from multiple angles without becoming predictable. That balance is exactly what modern NFL defenses are searching for. But there's another reason why this transition under Patrick Graham feels so important for the Steelers organization overall. Last season, there were stretches where Pittsburgh's defense looked completely dominant, but there were also moments where offenses seemed able to anticipate what was coming. The Steelers adjusted later in the year by increasing their use of cover 4, cover 6, and more match concepts. And according to everything coming out of OTAs, Graham is now pushing that evolution even further. This is no longer about running one defensive identity over and over again. This is about forcing opponents to prepare for multiple versions of the same defense every single week. One play may show 2 high safeties before rotating into man coverage. Another play may look like pressure before dropping defenders into zone coverage. Then on third down, Pittsburgh might suddenly unleash one of those NASCAR fronts featuring Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig, attacking all at once while Ramsey floats underneath as a rover. That's where this defense could become extremely dangerous, because when quarterbacks start hesitating for even half a second, Pittsburgh's pass rush becomes almost impossible to survive against consistently. And if the Steelers' secondary holds up the way the coaching staff believes it can, this team could create far more sacks and turnovers than fans saw last year. Still, despite all the excitement around the schematic changes, there are legitimate questions that remain unanswered. Can Jalen Ramsey fully thrive in this hybrid role over an entire season? Will the Steelers get enough safety depth if the Darnell Savage situation continues dragging out longer than expected? Can the younger defensive pieces adapt quickly enough to handle the communication demands of this system? And maybe most importantly, can Patrick Graham successfully bring all these moving